Welcome back to the Meraki podcast. My name is Serena Quiroga, a Chicago-based entrepreneur and what I like to call passionary. Meraki is a Greek word that means to do something with soul, creativity, and passion. I believe that prioritizing these values in our work and everyday lives can bring out the best in us, help lead us to our ikigai or purpose, and create a fulfilling life. So, in this series, I interview changemakers and leaders in various industries who are doing just that, leading with passion and leading with Meraki. I'm really excited about today's episode where I sat down with Denise Baretto, the Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for the Chicago Transit Authority. I hope that you resonate with her story the way that I did and that it inspires you to lead with Meraki. Welcome back to the Meraki podcast. I'm your host, Serena Quiroga. So today, it's with great honor to welcome Denise Baretto on today's episode. Denise is a storyteller, strategic partner, angel investor who is passionate about equity, marketing, and policy. She currently stands as the Chief Equity and Engagement Officer for the Chicago Transit Authority, but also is the co-founder of Serqet Productions, an award-winning production company and a two-time TEDx speaker. I met Denise as a guest panelist at the Fall 2023 Chicago cohort of Chicago 200, and I was really inspired by her vision and the way that she was able to just authentically speak what her mind was, and as a leader in Chicago, I thought that this was really admirable. So, of course, I wanted to get here on the podcast and just hear her story firsthand and see kind of what we can learn from her leadership styles and her story. So welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so glad to be here. And I always laugh when you get older, you'll feel this way too. When people describe you, you're like, who's that? Who are they talking about?
Hearing about yourself from another perspective is always very taking back. But I love it. So I kind of want to just start off this by asking you if you could give us some insight into some of your biggest hobbies and passions.
Sure.
Outside of work, personal life,
course.
Everything.
Yeah. So, I definitely work hard, but I also play hard. And when I think about like my hobbies and things like that, I guess the first thing I would say is I'm sort of an anthropologist outside of work, meaning I love the study. I'm curious. I'm a learner. And so when I think about the things I care about the most, like number one is probably just storytelling and hanging out with people and getting to know people. And I would add that travel is one of my big things. Like last year, my my anthem for last year was that I was globetrotting. Like when I gave my, my whole affirmation for the year, it said globetrotting. And you know what? I said that every day starting in January. And last year I went to Belize, I went to Thailand, I went to Vancouver, British Columbia, and then I went to Colombia, Santa Marta, Colombia in South America. So the point is I love to travel, love astrology. I'm a super Scorpio and I love tarot and I'm really woo-woo. I'm like the total auntie who has her crystals with her right now. And I guess the last thing that is tied to that is jewelry making. Ooh. Ironically, it was when my kids were little, one of my girlfriends got into jewelry making, and whenever I do something, I like go really hard. So I bought all these materials, and for a while, that was what I was giving everybody all the time. You get bracelets, or you get earrings, or you get a necklace. Hadn't done it for a really long time. And then in the last 6 months, I guess, I started dating someone, and I was, I bought like a black obsidian arrow in Vancouver. Oh, wow. And it was like, I started this thing where I was buying crystals for myself and for this dude that I'm into. And next thing you know, I was making like necklaces for us. And I was like, and the thing about jewelry making, which is so cool, I am a person, I have all fire and all water in my chart with just a slither of air. I have no earth. Yeah. So I'm a go person. Well, you can't go when you're making jewelry. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're beating something or you're trying. Yeah. Like the delayed satisfaction, but also the slowness. Like you can't rush when you're wrapping an obsidian arrow with, some gold tone wire. You have to take your time. Or if you're beating a necklace or beating some earrings and you're using all those different tools, you have to slow down and stop. And so, last year my theme was honey, and I'm keeping it this year because honey is slow, right? It's slow to make, slow to move, and I need to slow down a little.
Especially countering that with the type of work that you do, it totally makes sense by having those hobbies that kind of keep you grounded. And I didn't know you were into crystals. I am too.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really big into vision boards and like manifestation. I'm making mine tonight, actually.
Oh, nice.
So.
Sending you some good juju right now.
Thank you. So yeah, I think it's really cool to see that someone who is in a very high, maybe not high stress, but high involvement.
It's high stress.
High stress.
The Chicago Transit Authority is absolutely high stress. Second largest transit agency in the country. I'm the inaugural Chief Equity and Engagement Officer. And you and I see all across this country right now, people are trying to undo any progress that we've made. And so jobs like this probably won't exist in a few years because literally really scary. But you know what? The work is still there. Yeah. So you can call it whatever you want to call it. But as a country, we've been delusional and we've left people behind and we've purposefully excluded whole groups of people. And so I will always have work. Yeah. Right? Regardless of what well, whatever it's called, it doesn't matter. Yeah. If people decide they want to cut DEI positions or equity positions, then, my role will be about access and opportunity because we still need access and opportunity for more people than we have today.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Before I want to really get into why you're getting, why you got into your equity work and where that passion comes from. But I noticed that you have a large background in marketing and you're a CEO of a marketing production company. So how did that start and how did those types of roles prepare you then to shifting into these equity roles?
Great question. So let's be real. No matter what happens, the way people talk about it or the way they experience it, that matters more than what happens. Yeah. And so that's like something when I was a child, I was the kid who, how when you don't because you grew up with remotes. Yeah. I was the friggin' remote, okay? I'm old enough to be like, I had to get up and turn the television for my dad. So I can remember when I was young and we'd be watching a show and the commercials would come on. Well, my dad would be like, oh, change the channel. And I would always refuse because I love to watch the ads. Yeah. Like I liked the ads more than I liked the show. And I remember jingles and I remember, just things that are memorable that keep people engaged. And I have loved being, my degree is in communications and business marketing. And I have loved watching marketing evolve and get in the hands of the people, right? Like when I started in 1993, you probably weren't even born, but when I started. I wasn't. We love it. I know. Okay. But But when I started in 1993, we as marketers would tell you how to feel. Yeah. We would tell you how to feel. We would tell you why you wanted those Doritos at the Super Bowl, or we would tell you why you had to wear those Jordache jeans or whatever it was. And I have loved watching the way marketing has evolved to have the consumers control the brands and the consumers tell us what's a good and good marketers always knew that, and good marketers always engaged people and made sure that the brand experience was one that people loved and would talk about. But I love how social media and the internet sort of democratized it and made it available for everybody. So so what I'm saying is, and why did that prepare me for this? Well, just like everything else in this country, when you look at whose voices we don't hear, who we don't see, that's the kind of stuff I didn't, and just be real, I did never set out to be in DEI, but I'm a Gen X Black woman working in marketing. And so a lot of times I'd be in conversations and people would be like, well, what do you think? Or what do Black people, you know what I mean? And I would always laugh because I'm like, okay, I'm the only Black person or I'm the only young person in this room. And so I feel like that prepared me for DEI because all DEI is acknowledging. Yeah. It's acknowledging and celebrating and being inclusive of other people's experience and taking that in. And I think marketing in that is very, very parallel. Yeah. And the only reason, because when I started my business, I was going to be a strategic planner, right? And so when people would tell me, well, we want your opinion on DEI, at first I wouldn't, because I was like, are you only asking me that because I'm black? Or like, what? But then I realized it's a responsibility to be a black person who had a lot of opportunity. And my dad is a union. He was a union guy. He was one of the first black United Auto Workers, here in the Chicago area back in the 60s when them and the Teamsters first unionized. And that was at a time when black men were not allowed to unionize. And so because he had a trade, he was able. So I say that to say I had a lot of privilege. From the beginning. I lived, every house we lived in growing up, we owned. And that wasn't the norm for people that looked like me. And so I felt like a very tremendous responsibility. And I was always about justice, even when I didn't know I was about justice. Because I just knew, I knew that it was like, I lived in the burbs and all my cousins lived in the city. And the only difference between their dad and my dad was in a union early, and, bought a house before he ever even had me. Whereas some of my cousins, their dads worked in different places where they didn't have a union. And so their wages were robbed and they weren't protected. And so, those cousins, they didn't get to go on vacation or they didn't go to the kinds of schools I went to. And I noticed that and had a problem with it early.
I wanted to say something early on. Yeah. Back to your marketing point, I think influencer marketing has definitely taken the world by storm. And when you say that the brands are now forced to go onto the consumers, I think this allows people to really take that narrative back. And like you said, DEI roles are new, but the influencer marketing really forces all types of people to be able to get their face out and say their point. As you said, even when you were young and you didn't even realize that's what you were doing, you really were. So it makes sense that it's a pivotal role that you were able to like gradually move into.
Definitely.
Do you think that, I know you talk about having these almost like not split lives, but having split lives in the suburbs and having families like in the city. Do you think that people ever tried to invalidate your experiences because of those?
Oh yeah. I mean, you saw even the day that we worked together, like Dion and I, the two folks that were, we were very different in the way that we talked. And so, there are times when I'm in black spaces and the way that I talk, because I've always lived amongst white people, and and my dad, even though he was from the South, he spoke the King's English and he didn't want anyone to know he was from Alabama. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I've had, even to this day, but what's been beautiful, because I'm 52 years old now. So I have always not cared whether or not people accepted me. Did it hurt? And did I struggle at times feeling like I had to quote unquote prove myself or prove that I understood? Yeah, I felt that, but you know what? How I proved it was my actions, right? So even I remember when I would go to the city, I would be on the west side with my cousins from my mom's side or the south side, and my cousins would always protect me, and there was always this sense of justice. Like me and my sister would go and we'd have our money. Well, I would buy candy for everybody, right? It wouldn't be like, oh, the rich cousin, because that's how it was. The rich cousin, come. You guys, I did air quotes because you can't see me, but because we weren't rich. But I did I would go in and I would have my $5 for the weekend, and I would have it spent in one day, because how fun is it to have candy by yourself if all my cousins, you know what I mean? So I was always like generous and sharing and understanding that my success, which at the time was having candy money for the candy store, my success was dependent on everyone's, or my fun for the weekend. Now I know different people are different, but for me, I couldn't wait to get the money for the weekend so that I could share it, so that we all could have candy and we could all have fun, or get on the train or the bus. Because back then, we'd go get our tokens and get on the CTA so that we wouldn't have to just stay in the neighborhood. But it was never just me and my sister. It was like I wanted everybody to feel the way we felt.
Definitely. I think that kind of goes to the point of, I remember when I first met you, you were talking about imposter syndrome, and I had asked you a question. I said, what advice do you have for young people, or even just anyone who struggle with imposter syndrome, especially in professional environments? How do you enter a room when you don't feel like you belong there? And you said, pretty much. Imposter syndrome doesn't exist. And I was very taken aback by that. And I think it was one of my favorite answers to the question I've ever gotten. Because usually, I think imposter syndrome, one, is a token term right now, especially because of TikTok. But everyone wants to talk about it because I think everyone feels it. But maybe we're not fully understanding what we're feeling. And so for you to come and say it only exists if you give it the power to exist.
That's right.
And that really stood with me because, especially as someone who's biracial, my dad's from Argentina, my mom is a white American, I always was in the gray areas, you know? And so never fully understanding, similar to you, like in your story, where you always stood and being generous to all sides of people that you know. Understanding where you fit in those places can be hard. Yeah. But when you had said that, it really just shifted my mindset about even what imposter syndrome is and made me rethink the whole concept. So I guess I'm really curious, like, where did this come from for you? It's a very niche and unique perspective.
Oh, I know. It's funny. People always, like, I get chills every time someone tells back to me what I said to them because everyone feels the same. Here's the thing. I'm a Black American woman. When I walk in a room, I belong because I fucking belong. Period. But apart from that, any room that I'm in, I have busted my ass to get there. Yeah. So chances are I am one of the smartest people in that room. And so the only time, and I've never felt, because I don't ever feel like an imposter. If I don't know something, I know someone who knows something. I'm one of the most resourceful people you'll ever know. So me not having an answer in a room doesn't make me an imposter. It just means I don't have that answer. Now, if, I think my experience, again, were there times when people tried to make me feel like I didn't belong? But that was them. That was on them. I never, and I would always be like, do you have a problem? Or what's going on? Like, wait, did you not hear me? I just remember being like, and staying curious is what it boils down to. Right? So when you, and I'm saying this to everyone who's listening, if you ever have those moments where you're questioning yourself or whatever, I would ask you to have grace with yourself, because chances are, you know what you know. Yeah. I'll say that again. You know what you know. And so whenever there's a moment that someone is questioning what you know, get curious and be like, well, that's interesting. What makes you say that? What's your, tell me about an experience that, because I'm telling you what I'm saying from my experience or from my research or from and so that takes it back, right? And I think women particularly are plagued with the imposter syndrome thing. And I feel like white people like even made that up, because Black people, we can't be made to feel any kind of way because of what we've experienced in this country and what we continue to experience, no matter what level of the company we're in, look at the woman from Harvard, like no matter where you are, people are always questioning whether or not you belong. So we don't even get the opportunity to entertain that. Like, that's energy that I can't put to what I'm good at. Yeah. So I literally mean that. Like, imposter syndrome does not exist. It exists for people who haven't done the work. Like if you are in a space where you have a lot of passion, you have a lot of drive, and you feel like you don't know something, that doesn't make you an imposter. That means you just have to learn more. Yeah. Right? So that's my thing. And I really mean that for women, and I really mean that for young women. So the reason I went as hard with you is because that day I knew I was meeting, people between the ages of 18 and 24. And I've seen that people are talking about imposter syndrome a lot. And I just think it's horseshit. And it is yes, because, and it is for you all too. Yeah. You know things I don't know. You know lots of things I don't know, and you have a perspective that I don't have, even if you're born in 2002 or whatever you said. And I respect that. When you walk into a room, whatever you're bringing in, I'm welcoming that, and I'm encouraging that, and I'm any modicum of power that I have, I'm building it with young people and building it with other people. And I think that's the other thing that kind of makes me a different kind of leader, because I'll say it, Gen X, you're a crabby generation and you are a generation that's mad, and we have every right to be mad, babies. We do. But the deal is we should not ever take that out on younger people, right? The way the boomers acted to us, we need to be the ancestors that we didn't have. And that's what I endeavor to do. I'm so excited to be in the C-suite finally. But you can bet your ass I spend most of my time talking to people about what it is they want to do. And how can I, as the leader of your line of managers, how can I support you in that? I just had a meeting with someone today, Jonathan, and he, was sharing with me what his background was before he got to CTA. He was thinking about what he wants to do. And the thing I said to him, and I met a young lady named Laura today. And both of them, I said to them, I'm team Laura, I'm team Jonathan, regardless of whether you work in my division, because I'm taking the time right now to share myself with you, share my wisdom. And I want you to win. Yeah. I want you to win on my team. But if winning for you looks like it's outside of this team and it's in CTA, then I want to help you. Or if winning for you looks like it's outside of CTA, even better. But I'm trying to make CTA a place where people don't feel like they have to leave, right? Yeah. There's enough opportunities there for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the older I've gotten, I've definitely come to realize that we all are just living completely different lives, and there is no place for comparison because you haven't walked the path I have, and I haven't walked your path, but there is always something to learn from each other. And I think it is very endearing to see that there are older generations who are willing to really give back and just invest that time into future leaders, because that's how the world is going to go round, or else we're just doomed to repeat the same things in history.
We see it right now. Yeah. We see it right now. And that idea of, because when I came into the workforce in 1993, I just have to keep saying that. I can remember very vividly, after being in my job for 18 months, I wasn't getting a promotion. The person that was quote unquote working above me wasn't moving. So I remember when I started looking for a job and people were like, why are you looking for a job? And I'm like, because I'm not going to get anywhere in this job. And so you think about that. That was way ahead of when people now it's normal. You don't expect people to stay anywhere. But I can remember early on in my career, people were just like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing's wrong with me. I want to contribute at a high level, and I want to contribute somewhere where I'm valued. I'm not being valued here, so I have to move. And so I moved a lot in those first 8 years after college, and the next thing you know, I woke up and everybody was doing it. And now no one expects to be in a job very long. I do wish that we could help people transfer knowledge, because that's the one thing I still don't see as much of. People very much are like, oh, I'm in charge, this is mine, and it's like we as a society are going to be better when we have the opportunity to share knowledge. And like you said, value all the different experiences that are in the workplace around you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think especially to young people listening, it's really crucial to dip into your toes into a lot of different passions that you might think you have, because frankly, your 20s is the time to discover yourself. And I think you can see a lot of examples, even you, for example, if you can always redefine yourself no matter your age. But the 20s are an essential time to really experience different things, and you don't have to be defined by one single role. And I think that is what's really important in finding yourself and your ikigai and your passion, and then going from there. You can at least find out what you like, but also what you don't.
Yeah.
And that's just as equally as important. So I did want to ask you, with the recent resignation of the Harvard president, like we were talking about, there's been lots of widespread regression on the support of DEI roles. So as someone who is in their first year of a new role at the CTA, that's DEI, how have people responded to you specifically in this creation of your role?
So great. It's interesting. I was on a radio station recently, WVON, which is the Talk of Chicago, and they, their crowd is typically African American and older, because it's radio, right? And she asked me, she's like, DEI roles are under attack, kind of like what you're saying, but her exact words were, why did you take that, or what do you feel? And then if you look and Google another interview I did, I think WBBM, they used my interview that had nothing to do about this, but the line was, does the CTA need a DEI person, right? So that's a clickbait kind of, that's and
I saw that.
Yeah, you saw that, right? So what I'm saying is people have responded, it's been mixed. Yeah. because there are the trolls and the people out there who are delusional, who feel like we don't need this. What I would say to those people is look at the data. The data will tell you what we need and what we don't need. The whole idea of meritocracy is so funny, because if you look at the history of this country, if meritocracy really was it, so that just means only white people have been deserving of opportunities, only white people have been qualified. Like, I just find it so fascinating that when people start talking about diverse hires, the first thing out of people's mind or out of their mouths tends to be, well, we don't want to lower our standards. I'm like, you do know that black women, we're the most educated segment of the American population. Nobody gets degrees to the level that we do. And haven't for years, right? We are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs, and we get less than 1% of all the venture capital out there. So let's talk.
I did not know that.
Yes, we get less. I mean, it's like less than 0.5% of the venture capital that's moving. Wow. So when I tell you, so when someone has the nerve to twist their lips to ask me or to say, do I think, we still need this? Yes, we do. It's very clear. Like, systemically, we are still in a place where we don't value everyone. And so the other thing that I want to drive home about this, because, I think there's a difference between DEI and justice, right? And I think that's what the country's afraid of. Right? So if you just talk about things in the way of DEI, then you can keep it conceptual. But when you start talking about justice, okay, let's start talking about justice. Yeah, I understand why white people are sad and scared. But you should be very, very, you should be happy to know that black people don't want anything but justice, which means we're not trying to make you go through what we went through. What we want is that our kids don't have to go through what we went through. That's what we mean. And that's what my ancestors wanted. And while we have made progress, we are looking at right now a systemic attempt to claw back all the progress that we've made. That woman was bullied out of her job. That's it, plain and simple. And you know what? I was bullied out of my job once. When I was an elected official in McHenry County, which is 40 something miles, northwest of, where that is. Yeah. I got elected, before there were all these women of color childbearing age squads. There was no squads when I was running. I mean, people like me and Stacey Abrams, who, she ran for governor and they robbed it from her in Georgia. She was in the state house there. Nobody was investing in women of color running for office until AOC and those guys came along. And I'm not mad at that, but I guess what I'm getting at is I'm a trailblazer. I see things before everyone else sees them. I knew because I knew I wanted to lead. So I knew that if I took the courage and knocked on those doors, I bundled my kids up and put them in a wagon. My daughter was born in 2001, and my son in 2005. And those kids were with me as I knocked on 3,000 doors twice. But what's interesting is now young women are like, we need babysitting. And I have to admit, I get a pit in my stomach because I'm like, what? I didn't, but not because I begrudge them, but just because I'm like, wow, they wouldn't even be able to ask for that if I didn't do what I did. Yeah. Right. So I know the United States history repeats itself. So the reality is we're in sort of the new reconstruction, where this country would rather burn itself down than share the resources. Well, guess what? We'll just burn it down then. Yeah. Because you know what? We're not. Yeah, exactly. We're not going back. Yeah. We're not going back. Gay people aren't going back in the closet, right? And black people are not going back in chains. So get used to it. Black people are going to be leading, and people of Latin descent are going to be leading, and people, who are Arab are going to be leading, and Muslims are needing to be respected as much as Christians in this nation. Period. We got to get there, and we will. It's just, we probably will have some more setbacks, though.
It's America.
It's America, and it's 2024. It is a election year.
Yeah. I'm a little afraid for that, but I think one thing that I really wish more people understood is that the achievements of one group of people does not mean the setback of another. No. And I think that's one thing we've never as a nation been able to understand. I don't know, it's just very distressing to think that we take one step forward and then two steps back.
Well, and I will say this, I the thing about it is I want to talk about how she probably was the most qualified president Harvard has ever had.
Yes.
The amount of vetting that they do to put someone in those positions. And Harvard failed her in two ways. One, they know what their institutional reputation is. They know what their donors expect. I mean, so if you think about it, the institution set her up to fail, right? And so that's one. And then, and I got a better story. There's an organization here where a white man who's actually from Evanston, not originally, but he was the leader of that organization. And when he took it over, considering that most of the people they served and who they worked with were people of color, black people, he was pained to take the executive director roles, but he took it. And guess what he did? He spent 5 years rebuilding the board, rebuilding the environment. And then he stepped aside and said, we need to do a search for somebody who would be more appropriate than me. Here's what I love about that story. His name's Bob. Let me tell you something. Bob is not materially harmed by stepping aside to let a black woman lead that organization. And that's the thing white people need to get their arms around. You are never materially harmed to do right. It's just not possible because this country is so rich and abundant. There is enough for everyone. In fact, the more we find ways to take care of more people, the better we're going to be. Health-wise, otherwise. And so the point is we need more Bobs. We need people to see that, you know, it's not enough to hire a black person. You have to make sure it's an environment where they can flourish. And so he did that. Like the woman who's a new executive director, I think she's been there 4 months. She's got every shot to actually be successful because he didn't hire her, step aside and hire her into that all-white organization or a board that was, you know, he made sure that by the time she got there, it was going to be an environment where she could flourish. And so Harvard did Dr. Gay a disservice because, you know, they knew what they were doing. And even the narrative around it being the shortest tenure, it's shortest because y'all made it shortest. Yeah. Not because she wanted to leave and she left. You know what? Kudos to her because I'll tell you, black women of the boomer generation, and she is, they typically are sufferers, right? Gen X black women, we don't suffer. and definitely younger, like my daughter, your Gen Z, not at all. And so I love that she put her care of herself and her family first because she was getting death threats and there was all kinds of, you know, really horrible things. Her health outcomes could have been different. And so good for her. I mean, obviously I was sad and it was like a hard thing to see. But I was actually loving that she didn't just stay there and let herself be bullied. I mean, we don't have to let you have our talents.
Yeah, sure. It can be served elsewhere, and there's always going to be people who are going to value you. And I guess that's a big question I have, especially as a young woman entering the workforce, is how, when you know that you look different than other people who are typically in the room, not that you have to prove to people, but how do you get that foot in the door and remaining confident when people question your authority or your likeness to be in that room?
Sure. Well, I go back to what I always say, stay curious. So your nervous system, when you feel threatened or you feel like uncomfortable, I want you to ask yourself, what makes other people uncomfortable with my presence? Notice what I said. Not about what makes them uncomfortable with my presence, right? Not your problem to solve, but at least you know what I mean? Because you take it off of you, right? Because you belong in that room. Yeah. So if someone's acting up, it's on them and that's their problem. So one, you ask yourself that question. And if it persists, you ask them, are you okay? You want to know that? No, and you know, we laugh about it, but even when I was younger, the person that you're sitting in front of right now I was very similar to this. And how do I know for sure? Last year in May, someone sent a picture to me from 1994. So I was 22 years old. And I saw that picture. It was a reminder of back then, in that particular trip, I was the only woman on this U.S. national team trip to Cleveland. They wouldn't let me go to the locker room or whatever. And I can remember I never felt like bad, like, oh my gosh, they're excluding me. I thought, man, these people are missing out. Yeah. Because I'm amazing. I'm amazing. And everyone that's listening, the things that you know, what you bring to the table, you are uniquely poised for whatever it is you want to do. And so when people act up or act out, don't internalize their insecurities, right? Don't internalize their issue. That's their issue. And as a young person, how you get in the door is you build relationships like you just did, right? Like you and I are now connected for the rest of our lives. We're homies, right? And so if you see that I'm doing something in a room that you want to be in, guess what? All you have to do is call me. But relationships are how that's how you get your foot in the door. And it's funny, you talk to people about the things that you want to do. I think about how when I started my production company, that started because of my divorce, and how I was trying to watch a movie and just wanted to see a movie of a middle-aged Black woman having to start her life over and date. And I didn't see anything out there. And so I was like, okay, I guess I have to go make that movie, right? Because my life is a movie, so I guess I have to go make that series or whatever. And I just remember, thinking, I'm very new. So I'm new. My company is 5 years old. It was 5 years ago, we were at Sundance Film Festival. And I'll never forget someone asking me, they're like, why do you think you can do this? Like, they were literally like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I'm 47. I'm not 27. I've had 2 other companies. This is my 3rd career. I'm from a state. I was a politician in a state where we send governors to jail. Honey, I've worked in politics in Illinois. I can do anything. Hollywood ain't got shit on me, right? Okay. So literally it's just that staying curious. And when your nervous system tries to betray you, just take things 10 seconds at a time, breathe, and remember who you are. Remember who you are. And part of that is knowing who you are. Yeah. I journal a lot. I do this a lot because this is a reinforcement of who I am. Yeah. Having you introduce me at the top of this is a reminder of who I am. So and I had a rough day today. And literally to the minute I walked in this room, I was battling things. But then you told me who I was. You reminded me with that introduction, and I could snap right into this interview. That's what we have to do for ourselves. And that's why I wear bracelets that, remind me. My bracelet says I can and will thrive. That's what it says today. I wear my different jewelry. I have my mood ring. This has changed colors 4 times since we've been here, Yeah. So I give myself visuals, cues, and signals to remind me of who I am.
I like that a lot. I think it's a good attestation to just staying grounded, like you said at the very beginning, and just knowing who you are, which can be hard, Figuring out who you are is the first step, but journaling and having those practices is really important. Yeah. And it's cool to see that can be carried out in a lot of different ways all throughout your life. I think in the last 3 weeks, I've heard from 3 or 4 of my mentors or people I look up to that life is long. And not in a bad way, but life is long, and you have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of things that you put your mind to, and it doesn't have to be one thing. You can do a lot of different things, and even if your interests change, you can shift paths. And I think as someone who just got out of college, it's been very stressful to think, oh my gosh, what next? I have to pick something, but to know that you can be out of your 40s and starting a production company and already having done politics and having all these different experiences is very motivating. So cool.
Thank you.
I do have one last question for you before we close out. I really want to know, why are you passionate about mentorship and giving back to the younger generations?
Yeah, it's mainly, first of all, I'm still very young myself. And what I mean by that is energy-wise, right? And I think about when I was a young person, I would have loved to have had a Black woman, look at me and encourage me or whatever. And so that became a thing it was really important to me. as people would quote unquote look up to me. And that doesn't just start when you're older. You live long enough, in a couple years there'll be someone looking up to you. And there's just a lot of satisfaction in being able to impact people, right? To be able to talk to people and have them be different than they were when they came to you. And the other thing is to see people. We do a lot of talking at one another. We do a lot of listening to answer. Very rarely do people really look people in the eye, and particularly young people. Young people need the guidance, and not because it's just, it's like a validation, and you want to be encouraged. You want someone to see you. And I think people tend to not see people till they're older.
Yeah.
Right? And so I am on a crusade to see people while they're young and help build them. Because I hate when I hear these stories that people found themselves or they just felt like themselves in their 40s. Why? You've been on this planet for 20 years as an adult and no one took the time to see you. Yeah. That's super important to me. And I'm so blessed because while I didn't have a Black woman doing it, I did have my cousin Scotty, who, he also married outside his race. And he was the one person in my life who was older than me, who saw me and made a point to make sure I knew he saw me. And so I made a point to be that person. And I'm like that in every environment I'm in. At work, well, you saw when we met at the event, I just strive to see people. And because when people see themselves, they can do anything and not before. And so sometimes you need other people to see you as well.
Yeah. Gives you that boost of confidence. Well, I want you to know, as we close out, that it does mean a lot. It was one of the first things I noticed about you, and the way you speak to people is it makes a difference. And I think regardless of age, regardless of experience, if we all are able to replicate that in our exchanges and our interactions, it can help everyone feel seen. And that's what's going to motivate people to be kind and to motivate others to really step into their power and do the things they love, which is what Meraki is all about. So thank you so much, Denise, for coming on. It really meant a lot, and I thought we had some great conversations. So.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Meraki podcast. This season, I'll be rolling out monthly episodes with local Chicago leaders, and also this summer we'll be going global, so follow us on our socials to stay up to date. Our Instagram is @lead.with.meraki, or find us on X @leadwithmeraki with 2 F's. If you're interested in being featured on a future episode, feel free to fill out a form in our bio for a follow-up. I hope today's episode inspired you to follow your passions, and as always, lead with Meraki. See you next time.